I call this segment the Royal Pain.
Okay.
Prince Michael Alexandrikov Dmitry Oblonsky Romanov, or as the Hollywood crowd knew him, Prince Michael Romanoff.
Okay, I've never heard of this.
You're going to enjoy this.
All right, this is going to be good.
Prince Michael Romanoff came into Hollywood scene in 1927, and he did what any new person in Hollywood does, hype themselves up like they're starting a cult, because maybe if this goes well, I can start a cult. He looked at this beautiful late 20s glitzy town and thought to himself, what a mark. Sucker. He was quite the sight in 1927. He was mustachioed. He had an Oxford accent. He had
1927
spats.
this
1927,
is?
yeah.
Oh, he had spats.
He had spats.
He must be a made man.
He had a Malacca walking stick.
Waka.
He had a Malacca walking stick,
What is
which
that?
is like a really fancy, made of like nice wood.
Okay.
He smoked cigarettes monogram with the Imperial Russian R. The guy was...
Another movie I watched recently, you're describing Dolomite.
That's him. You've heard of him before. The guy was classy and well-traveled, and he could spin a yarn. After all, he was Russian royalty, a branch of the renowned Romanov dynasty that ruled from Russia for centuries until the revolution, which was 10 years earlier. What?
The ones that are all dead now.
Yeah, they're all dead now.
Except for Anastasia.
Except for Natasha Romanoff. That's Black Widow. I've been watching a lot of MCU. Like I said, he was part of the Romanov family.
Who do you think would win in a fight, Ant-Man or Tony Soprano?
Ant-Man. He gets small and then he gets really big.
Yeah, but Tony Soprano just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
You hit Tony Soprano with gamma rays.
You better watch out, because he'll throw gamma rays right back.
Okay, wildlife, this guy. He was the cousin of Tsar Nicholas and the morganatic son of Tsar Nicholas III.
What did you just say?
Morganatic?
What does that mean?
That means that royalty married a commoner.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's a word?
Yeah,
when was this word invented?
Morganatic. He was also the son of one of the men who killed Rasputin.
Wait a minute. How could he be? I thought it was it royalty? No. Who killed Rasputin?
Just to hang out.
I want the conclusion right now. I'm so
He
curious.
attended school at Eton College and Winchester College and Harrow College, as well as Oxford and Harvard, but also the Royal Military. He did a lot of college. Then he moved on to fighting for the British Foreign Legion, which included driving a taxi to the French army during the defense of Paris. Then he fought on the Western Front as a British lieutenant, and then...
Why was he fighting in the British Army if he's a Romanov?
British Foreign Legion during World War One.
Yeah, I guess there was no royalty at that point in Russia.
And as Cossack, so he was a British lieutenant on the Western Front and a Cossack colonel
Okay, that makes more
on the
sense.
Eastern Front. He won a Legion d'Honneur for his bravery in combat, and in his time defended the Winter Palace in Russia against a Bolshevik invasion, and served 6 years in solitary confinement for killing a German nobleman during a duel. This guy lived a life. So when you are this guy and you love telling people your story and you're a well-to-do man about town, you put that energy out there, people notice. At this point, he gets the attention of a Hollywood mogul. That mogul is studio exec Daryl Zanuck. So Zanuck is in New York. He's hanging out with Malcolm St. Clair, the director. I think they meet Romanoff there, or they met him a little earlier, but by this point, they're all hanging out with each other. So Zanuck gets a call in New York from Jack Warner, and this is 1927. It's about the movie called The Desired Woman, which he was producing. So Zanuck has heard Romanoff say that he knows the sedan like the back of his hand. So Zanuck thinks this guy could be useful. So Zanuck suggested to Warner that since the film was about the British Foreign Legions, they could just bring Prince Romanoff as a technical advisor, since the guy was in the British Foreign Legion, and they would pay him like $75 a week to do it. Warner agreed, but Warner thought this guy wasn't in the BFL. Warner used this term to describe Romanoff as a phonus balonus, and he thought, I'm going to catch this guy. He wasn't in the British Foreign Legion.
Who?
Jack Warner.
Okay.
Is like...
the guy who bought the ranch.
Yeah, exactly. He's thinking, this guy they're sending me to be a technical advisor, he didn't... Something's fishy. Jack Warner goes to a used bookstore on Hollywood Boulevard and buys a rare copy of the official training manual for the British Foreign Legion. In it were 40 key questions that were required for a BFL serviceman, and Warner was going to trap him, this phony red-handed. So he calls Romanoff over, debonair man about town, and he grills him. And Prince Romanoff...
What do you do when you have to tie a knot and you don't have any rope?
Pee somewhere you don't belong.
Borscht and blinis. Borscht and blinis.
He's on the ground. He's circling like he's one of the Three Stooges, and he's saying beans a lot. So he grills Romanoff based on this book on the 40 questions. Romanoff does not flinch, answers every question with confidence. As Warner puts it, he must have read the same book. At that point, he couldn't...
I see you like Larry Edmonds.
So at this point, he couldn't drum up a good reason to not hire Romanoff. So he's like, okay, well, you're going to work on this movie. So it's 1927. Zanuck puts Romanoff in charge of technical advisor for the movie Desired Woman, which was directed by Michael Curtiz, who directed Casablanca and Mildred Pierce, what? Gratiz?
I was just one step ahead of you, that's all.
Oh, okay. No big deal. It's just like you're always trying to usurp me.
Usurp you, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Did I tell you I was in the British Foreign Legion?
It's supposed to take place, this movie was supposed to take place in the Sahara Desert. They are not going to haul butts out to the Sahara Desert, so they're going to go to Yuma, Arizona and film it. It gets so hot and set that Curtis and Romanoff can't stand it, so they remove most of their clothes to cool off, and then they were arrested by local police for indecency. Warner had to pull strings to get them released. I'm not quite sure what his input in the production was, but according to the Curtis biography, Romanoff spent most of his time chasing skirts and living lavishly until he crossed his path with a former Russian imperial guard, Theodore Lodogensky, who would later be called Theodore Lodi, because Hollywood people are not going to try to pronounce a German name, especially in the late 20s, early 30s. Like, you can get arrested for saying that.
Wait, I thought he was a Russian Palestinian.
Oh, yeah, German name. I put German name. I meant Russian name. So let's talk about Theodore.
Wait, so was he Russian or German?
He was Russian. I put German.
Okay. You might be a redneck.
No, it's all the same. It's all the same country.
If
So
you
let's
think
talk
Germany's
about
Russia.
Let's talk about Theodore Lodi for a second.
You might be Hitler. Go on.
Got a funny mustache? You might be Hitler. Theodore Lodi was born in 1876, and before the 1917 Russian Revolution was a general in the Russian army. After the revolution, when the Romanov monarchy was overthrown, he was captured and faced a firing squad. Each morning, he saw a group of his fellow soldiers who defended the monarchy led away to be shot. One day, a saw was smuggled into the prison inside a loaf of bread, and after some bribes were made to the guards, he was able to escape.
Which is what bread was mostly made out of.
Mostly made out of saws and files.
Sawdust and saws. Someone got confused. A baker got confused.
He didn't know what his job was. Don't hire a handyman to be the baker.
You might be a Russian Cossack.
Okay, so he escapes from this. He hid in Moscow for months, growing a beard and sleeping in cemeteries. His wife joined him, and together they escaped Russia. They had a family car. They painted a red cross on it. His wife dug up an old nurse's uniform, put her husband in a straitjacket, and went to the border with her husband, saying, "Comrades, as you can see from these papers, I have been ordered to take the insane comrade Kaczynski to the asylum in Petrograd." And that's how they got out of Russia.
How many times did she use the word comrade? And
Probably 3 times. They continued different ruses until they reached New York with their last $50 they had to their name, and not a single English word. They did not know anything. They got to New York. But as the story goes, he made it work. He did grunt work for little money. He saved it, moved on to better, less grunt work, saved money. And by 1923, he was the proprietor of a fashionable and very unusual cafe called the Russian Eagle restaurant, which was very popular in New York at the time. A place that was particularly special for Russian refugees.
there's a lot of Russian restaurants that are eagle-based.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know why.
That's weird. We should look into that.
No.
I don't care. I said you should probably look into that. It was popular amongst the Moscow art theater crowd in New York, where Theodore met director Dmitry Bukowski. It's really hard to say. I'm going to say it really fast to cover that. I don't want to say it. Ready?
So no one will know.
Bukowski, who recognized him actually as a former commanding officer. He remembered him from Russia. Dmitry was working with Carl Laemmle producing Russian romance picture for Universal, and he thought to himself, I can use some technical advising. So in 1925, Theodore Lodi and his wife moved to Hollywood, California to work in the movies. He played a small role and advised for a movie called The Cossacks. It's said that the silent movie, a really classic one called The Last Command, is partly based on Theodore's life. That one was directed by another guy from Russia, Ernst Lubitsch, who also remembered him from Russia. After this, later in the story,
It's the biggest country in the world. How are they all? Oh, I remember you. You were Russian number 4.
after our story happens, but later, because we won't get back to Theodore that much, he opened up a cafe at the Hollywood Plaza Hotel. I believe it was also the Russian Eagle restaurant on Vine Street, and apparently hosted notoriously wild parties until 1935 when he died. All of this to say, one day, Prince Michael Romanoff and Theodore Lodi crossed paths in a dinner party in Hollywood in 1927, and Theodore Lodi smelled a rat. He looked at Romanoff's pants and said, in a deep Russian accent,
Wait a minute.
"Fire purifies all." You're on fire.
In Soviet Russia, pants wear you.
Apparently, Lodi says, "You're not Russian. I know Russian. I know the Romanov family. I defended them. You're not Michael Romanoff." And so he got film executives around him and was accusing him. And Michael Romanoff's like, "Aren't you like a restaurateur or something?" And that was such a put down that everyone's like, "Oh, damn.
Don't you like work for a living?
Aren't you like a common man?" So that happens. And Theodore continues collecting information about this guy, Romanov, this prince. And he's just waiting until something happens. And one day, an assistant comes in to see Theodore Lodi. And he's like, "This guy is using you as a reference, Prince Michael Romanoff." And he's like, "That's it." And he calls the Alley Examiner and he's like, "I have a story for you guys." And he had a reporter and somebody tipped off Romanoff. So let's catch up with
What is he getting out of this? What is this guy getting out of calling him out on this? Russian pride?
that he made fun of him. But also, like, this is a guy.
You put me down in front of Cecil B. DeMille.
This is a guy who lived the life.
Yeah.
He actually
Pride. I mean, it's stolen valor is what it is.
Probably, yeah. So the Alley Examiner wrote in the story that Prince Michael Romanoff was a fraud. He was not Russian royalty. He was not a prince. He did not need a cane. He did not know the Sudan like the back of his hand. His name was Harry Gerguson, and he now had to flee Los Angeles before they could arrest him for writing bad checks to hotels and restaurants, which was his scheme.
Was he CC Julian?
Pretty much. Theodore Lodi would say to anyone that would listen that Gerguson had permanently embittered his life. He was telling people like, I knew the real Prince Michael Romanoff. To add insult to injury, Theodore added, this Romanoff can't even speak Russian. Gerguson had been writing bad checks in San Diego, Tijuana, Reno, New York, and Los Angeles, and was finally caught in Salt Lake City and locked up for a $386 bounce check from Reno. And just like that, the charges were withdrawn, and he's back on the run going east. And apparently that was the thing that people couldn't figure out, was like he'd go to jail, and then the charges would be withdrawn, or he'd get bailed out, and they never figured out who was bailing him out. He hangs out in New York for a while after Salt Lake City, and then he boards the Olympic, which is a sea vessel, takes him to England, and he had no ticket. But what he did have was a letter saying, to whom it may concern, and I have to paraphrase the rest, but essentially, if you find me as a stowaway, just know it is in order to write about my adventures as a stowaway, so please do not interfere with my project. And he had a signature of a well-known writer on it. Totally worked.
Sincerely, William Shakespeare.
Yeah. Whoever wrote the Bible. Oh, this is legit. Oh, did you see this note? So his travels are hard to track because he's a con man on the run, but at some point in the early 30s, he is caught stowing away first class on a French cruise liner and is arrested. Then he escaped.
What a way you could get off life. Like, no, it's research for something I'm working on.
Oh, it's the 30s. We don't know better.
Here, take more of our money.
Here's my cash in my pocket. You're so brave. He is arrested on a French cruise liner, then escapes, vanished into thin air. The article had no idea what happened to him. In the same article, by the way, it states that he stayed 2 days in a doghouse atop the liner and then 3 days in one of the better suites. After he's arrested, they were going to deport him to Manhattan to, quote, gather some of his personal effects. The same article states that he once escaped from Ellis Island by swimming over to Jersey Shore one December night. After he escapes from the French cruise liner, he is spotted in New York before once again returning to Los Angeles in 1931 to party.
He learned from the Jersey Shore.
Who the hell is Henry Gerguson? Let's talk about him for a second. He was born in Lithuania in 1890 as Herschel Gerguson. He was the son of a dried goods merchant, and his father died before he was born, and after that, little Herschel was sent to America, from what I could tell, alone. He spent time in different orphanages and boys' homes in New York and eventually became a farmhand in Illinois somehow. At some point, he's done being Herschel Gerguson, and starts going by Harry Gerguson, a very Alice Island sort of thing. I don't know when he switched over. In the 20s, Gerguson ends up in London and becomes famous among the authorities for passing bad checks. It's suggested very heavily by the cops that he does not return to London. He then goes to Paris, where he manages to secure loans against millions of pounds of Russian royal jewels, insisting that they were about to be shipped over and he could pay everybody back.
Classic
Move. He then came back to the U.S. and continued scamming his way across the country. After spending time in England, he takes on an English accent, sort of like a half and half continental thing, I imagine, because people were like, it wasn't a very good Oxford accent.
A Lithuanian person doing an impression of Cary Grant.
And then, like, after he returns and he has a British accent crossing America, scamming people, he gets a monocle and managed to convince people in the Midwest that he's a relative of the Duke of Wellington. I think this is when he starts taking on the most famous of his 16 aliases, which was Prince Michael Romanoff. I couldn't remember. One was like Roy Adams, art dealer. He tricked people on trains and stuff.
Everything is royal related,
exactly,
though.
Yeah. Roy.
I'm Roy Disney. First name Roy, middle name Al, last name T.
And I like to drink tea, which is what my family is known for.
That's how I got involved in the Teapot Dome scandal.
Which we all know about and I didn't make up.
Which we all understand to be not about a rock or something.
You're stupid. So calling himself Prince Michael Romanoff, I think, was a pretty safe bet, because after the Russian Revolution, many of the actual Romanovs were exiled. So there were many destitute princes and princesses.
There were a lot of people. Isn't there a show on Netflix or something?
Yeah, about the Romanov legacy. And like Romanov
only
with
Anastasia, okay? It's only Anastasia.
That's the only one I recognize. And Black Widow. Romanov with a V could and was changed to Romanoff when immigrating to France. And apparently there were a lot of Romanovs out there all over the world, so you could just say, I'm a Romanov, and get away with it. And that it only happened 10 years earlier.
I am Romanoff.
I'm a Romanov.
I am Romanoff.
I am Romanoff. And everyone's like, no, you're not. Like, no, you're not. No, I defended them in the war.
Well, you're a restaurant owner. What do you know?
Yeah, he got me again. 10 years after the Russian Revolution, saying you're a Romanov, an exile Romanov, and you're still pretty well-to-do, is a pretty safe bet, he thought. He ends up back in Manhattan, living and lying lavishly, and in 1924, he's almost caught when he's attempting to crash a Rhode Island ball hosted by Reginald and Gloria Vanderbilt. He is thwarted because the Vanderbilts actually spent time in Europe mingling with true royalty, and they knew a faker when they were presented with one. And Gloria knew well enough to quiz Harry Gerguson, and he became flustered by this.
Which side of the plate does the fork go on?
Yeah. How many rooms were at your
Soviet
Winter Palace?
Russia, fork uses what?
Damn, he's got it.
That's it.
Weird Al Yankovic.
Not Weird Al Yankovic. Yakov Smirnoff.
Weird Yakov Smirnoff.
Even weirder Yakov Smirnoff.
So she chucked out Harry Gerguson, who was calling himself Prince Michael Romanoff. She was quoted as saying, "The truth of the matter is that you are no more Prince Michael Romanoff than I am, because he does not exist." So he left the party.
The church bells are going right now.
I have to go.
I simply must pray.
I have to get there. He pulled more scams, scamming as art dealers. He was scamming art dealers as well, getting arrested and released. Around this time, he was playing the part of Prince Michael Romanoff. He comes in contact with Darrow Zanuck and is taken to Hollywood as an advisor, quickly sent packing by Theodore Lodi and the Alexander. Now it's 1931. He's back in town.
LA.
What should he do? Be honest and try to carve out a humble living? How will he begin to apologize for grifting everyone? How could
A Lithuanian would never do that.
How could he even look at people in the eyes after he got caught lying to people, saying that he was this prince? Doesn't care.
So-
He just come back to town like nothing happened.
So wait, was he still like...
Continuing
I'm
the
still
ruse.
Romanoff?
I'm still Prince Michael
Yeah.
Romanoff. Even though the Alexander printed a thing and I've been caught, dead to rights, continues pretending he's Russian royalty, Prince Michael Romanoff. There's no way that could be okay with everyone, right? Well, in a town where everyone's out making movies and you've been playing a pharaoh for a month and you kind of keep forgetting that you're not a pharaoh. Maybe it's the thing, like maybe it's just normal. People just were like, it was not a big deal to people. People were like, fine, whatever. And it was like Prince Michael Romanoff just continued as it was like an inside joke, but like the inside was a very large part of the city full of rich and famous people. He was having articles written about him and his wild life as a con artist, and he never dropped the act. He never was like, "Hi, I'm Harry Gerguson." He was always Prince Michael Romanoff.
At the end of the day, who cares? Who is he hurting?
Exactly. He wasn't himself and the character. He was always Prince Michael Romanoff. And in the 1930s, when so much of the world was coming to Los Angeles to make it big in the movies, here was this guy who had already a built-in gimmick. So his fame rose because of his infamy. People liked to have him over for polo games and Hollywood parties. Like, that's the guy who's pretending to be Prince Michael Romanoff. It was like having a guy dressed as George Washington hang around your birthday party. He was coveted for his ability to lie on a whim. He was really good at it.
My first 5 birthday parties were at George Washington themed.
Guess who's here again? And it's a knock. Ye old birthday party here?
Doth thou, a honest little birthday boy?
I never tell a lie, after all, and you're a good boy. He started to appear in movies. You could see Prince Michael Romanoff in the movie Sing While You're Able To from 1937. He was very close friends with actor David Niven. He was a pallbearer at Errol Flynn's funeral along with Mickey Rooney.
What?
He was a regular at the Clover Club Casino, which was a private club on the Sunset Strip. The Clover Club was partly owned by Guy McAfee, the former cop turned mobster, who then went on to Vegas and formed the Vegas Strip and coined the term Las Vegas Strip. So the Prince was a popular guy. So what do you do now? He was scrapping money together, gambling at chess and backgammon, but that's not a job. He was honestly tired of scamming people, but he certainly couldn't do it in LA anymore. And he couldn't write bad checks anymore because he was having articles written about him in the Saturday Evening Post and Life magazine, entire spreads about him, nominating him the most wonderful liar of the 21st century US. How do you write a bad check after that? You can't scam people anymore. I'll tell you what he did. Do you know this guy's lasting legacy?
Dropping Errol Flynn during this funeral?
That's one of them. He decided to open up a restaurant. He got his Hollywood friends to back him, many of them only giving about $50 a piece, the price of a share. But the list of names included Jack Warner, who once called him Bonus Bolonis, Darryl Zanuck, who he scammed, Charlie Chaplin, Robert Benchley, John Wayne Whitney, James Cagney was one of these people.
Did he ever get punched by Charlie Chaplin?
I'm sure he was begging to. Too much of an honor. I mean, like, what's the Charlie Chaplin movie where he's a con artist scammer pretending to be royalty?
All of them? The Great Dictator?
That's it. So with this money, he got like a little more than $6,000 together, and then he put some loans together, and he opened up Romanoff's.
That sounds familiar.
It's a big deal, Beverly Hills old-time Hollywood restaurant.
Yeah.
We could do a whole episode of Romanov's if we wanted to. I didn't want to. He covered a place in portraits of himself just to get some art on the walls. The silverware came from a 5 and 10 store. He borrowed some liquor from friends. He turned furniture of his apartment over for a refrigerator. He like traded it. He scrounged together $250 for the opening night just so he can have change. This was not a scam. Not like everything I was reading, like, where's the scam come in? Where's the scam? But there wasn't a scam. This was an imposter doubling down and having the character he created go legit. Yeah. So he didn't go to legit. The character he created went legit. The crown jewel moment of opening night was when the first bank check from a customer came in front of Romanoff, and he inspected it like a ticking briefcase, and he was on the bomb squad. Romanoff was on Rodeo Drive.
Bite the check.
It was on Rodeo Drive, which I think was one of the first draws of Rodeo Drive. Rodeo Drive. It was on Rodeo Drive, which is crazy to me that like this guy who scammed all these people opened up one of the first draws to Beverly Hills, the Rodeo Drive.
Which is a scam in itself.
Yeah, exactly. It was close enough to Hollywood to attract Hollywood after awards parties, but also like the regular Garden of Allah crowd would just go there. The restaurant opened up in 1941, and through the years, it had about 3 locations. I think it had moved. I read locations thinking that he opened up a chain, but I think it was like he moved several times, but always on Rodeo Drive.
If I was that restaurant guy who called him out, I would be freaking out right now.
I would be like, What are you talking?
Now you're me.
Yeah,
you're
now you're me.
pretending to be
And
me
people are
now.
giving you respect for being a restauranteur. The restaurant is now, like I said, part of old Hollywood lore. If you want to know if you know it, you probably do. Its most common reference point is the photo of Sophia Loren side-eyeing Jane Mansfield's chest. That was taken at Romanoff.
Interesting.
Prince Michael Romanoff now had a reason to be snooty to people. He showed preferential treatment to all of his glitzy stars.
I'm a restaurant owner now, which is respectable.
Yeah, and I read in an article somewhere, one night Jack Benny, patron saint of touching his face, Barbara Stanwyck, and Robert Taylor, quick, Mary Boy and kill.
Jack Benny, Mary, all of them. Benny.
All in one night. I've seen Midnight Cowboy. I could do it. So those three went to Romanoff's as one party, and a waiter who had just moved from New York to come to Hollywood ran up to Romanoff. He told him, Jack Benny and Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor, they're waiting for a table. And Romanoff was like, nah, the hell with them. Made him wait for a table. Romanoff would later appear on a couple episodes of the Jack Benny Show. What?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It must have been funny seeing Jack Benny wait for a table. I mean, Seinfeld premise with Jack Benny in
With
it?
Jack
Are you
Benny,
kidding me?
and nobody puts down Jack Benny except everybody in Jack Benny's show, because that's the premise of the show, is to put them down. He was on What's My Line? He was on Jack Benny's show. Apparently, there's a reference to Michael Romanoff in Miracle on 34th Street, when the doctor compares Kris Kringle to a well-known restaurant owner whose name escapes him at the moment, who insists that he is a member of the Russian royal family, but is otherwise quite normal. That's a reference to Prince Michael Romanoff. Romanoff was a pillar of the community, giving money charitably to the Russian Relief and the Red Cross. Romanoff was known for enjoying the company of dogs at the table while he ate instead of people. There's even a photo of him eating with like dogs, and he's just like, "Oh, does Chauncey want a little steak?"
There's also a picture of him playing poker with a table full of dogs.
They were really good. He trained them. The restaurant Romanoff's was known for its chocolate soufflés. That was the thing it was most popular for.
Don't talk to me about chocolate soufflés right now. I don't know how to cook that, so I can't have it.
I'll never have it again. The restaurant was a favorite of Alfred Hitchcock's. They catered
What
the
wasn't?
My thought exactly. It's saying that, that was the favorite food of Orson Welles doesn't mean much. If it didn't kill him, it was a favorite food. So the wrap party of Spellbound was at Romanoff's. After the 20th Academy Awards in March of 1948, the after party was at Romanoff. Hitchcock's after party was there. Okay, so let's just wrap up where this goes. As we all know, several times talking about food and the changes of culture, Hollywood dining crowd and the American culture changes in post-war America. And if you aren't a car hop at a burger place with your best gal singing a Beach Boys song, then no one's going to eat there. The restaurant closes in 1962, and Romanoff dies in 1971 at the age of 81. Or was he 76? Nobody really knew. He was quoted as saying, "No one has ever discovered the truth about me, not even myself." That's particularly haunting thought, because how much of his persona that he created was for grifting and how much was used as a coping mechanism. Like, he arrived in this country as a poor orphan, raised in orphanages. Maybe Prince Michael Romanoff was a necessary psychological front, like a personality he created to survive. How else could this orphan farmhand go on adventures on a cruise ships, work on a movie, deny Jack Benny a seat, open a popular restaurant? Like, Theodore Lodi, like, he was like the grim, honest side of all the lies that Romanoff was saying. He actually served in the war. He knew the Romanoffs.
Yeah, and he got nothing.
He got nothing. He opened up a
Whitley
restaurant too, and he, like, no one remembers that restaurant the same
Dick
way.
Whitley.
Yeah.
What is his name?
Romanoff?
Madman. Dick Whitley. Dick Harrington.
You remember his real name, but you can't remember that his name is Don Draper?
Is his name Dick Whitley? It's not Dick Whitley.
It's Dick Whitley.
There's no way it's Dick Whitley. His
Or
name is
Dick Whitman. Dick Whitman. You always say Whitley because you're stupid.
I feel like that's the situation. Only both the guys are still alive.
Yeah, they both survived. Their stories and their story beats are so parallel, but look what happens. I think really, like, maybe this town just loves a phony with a gimmick. Or maybe this town is about remaking yourself. And there seems to be a support system made in LA just for remaking yourself. It might be a city of phonies, but it might be people trying to realize the best versions of themselves.